I'm going for my 4th degree black belt in Taekwondo later this year, and I have to make a personal essay of my choice on something martial arts related. And I was thinking long and hard about this for all of 2 seconds when I came up with the idea to do a deep dive into how martial arts has influenced fighting games over the years. Well, yes, there are some fighting games like Guilty Gear, Marvel vs. Capcom, Dragon Ball FighterZ, which take a more anime approach, right? You're not realistically going to be doing a lot of the stuff they do in there. The core of the characters and gameplay and all of fighting games is based on the idea of martial arts. The very first and most known martial arts and fighting game is the worldwide known the Japanese striking martial art. Strike hard, strike fast, no mercy. With many different styles such as Shotokan, whose founder is Funakoshi, which seems to find its starts at 1960, and Kyokushin, founder Masuyama in 1964. It was one of the first worldwide martial arts phenomenon, seeing karate schools pop up all over America and other countries. The idea and traditions of this striking art also made such a big influence into video games with fighting games. Shotokan and Kyokushin have the biggest influence. These styles are very similar to the fictional styles you see characters use in fighting games, whether it be the full contact or sport demonstrations, or just the idea of karate. One of the earliest examples of this influence is before we had what most would consider the modern fighting game, this was the most revolutionary fighting game at the time. An arcade and NES game that is a digitized version of a karate point sparring tournament, earning points based on the hits they make, and resetting and doing it again. A lot of traditional karate moves make it in here, like the punch, hook kicks, things that are found across many forms in standard practice. You can see here this move is a very common move you see in the katas of karate, where someone steps and strikes with a chamber in the other hand. But there were two moves that had more influence than I think anyone would ever imagine. A flying side kick and a sweep turning hook kick. Two moves that are seen across karate, but are more moves used in demonstrations and movies. These two moves echoed across all of fighting games. While the game gave a baseline for what was to come, using karate tournament systems as a very fundamental base, but the moves like the jump side kick and the sweep hook kick are now staples of fighting games. There's not a fighting game where you don't see a character jump up in the air and throw a kick, or do a sweep kick and knock their opponent to the ground. It also took more than just moves from fighting games. The whole concept of the fight was a martial arts idea embedded in this game, reading your opponent, going high or low, or even blocking in place, as most martial artists stand and block, as in tournaments in real life getting pushed back by your opponent is typically a bad thing. But the real game to submit martial arts and karate, being the fighting game martial arts, was in 1987, Street Fighter was released, main character being Ryu and Ken, practitioners of a fictional style of Shotokan karate. This is also where we start to get health bars, akin to the practice of Kyokushin. Kyokushin tournaments where there is no longer a point system but a knockout system. You hit and strike as many times as you want. All that matters is the last man standing. This is also where special moves are introduced. Well, now these being a bit fantastical, like the spinning inside out kick known as, and the flying uppercut known as the, are not unrealistic, but very exaggerated. There is one, the is the idea of shooting energy out of your hands. But this is actually a reference to ki or chi, the idea of life energy that many martial arts have. In karate, it is known as ki. Yells and certain movements are said to heighten and unlock ki, which is probably also one of the influences for why they shout the moves when they do them. The movement Ryu does to do a Hadoken is also found in Shotokan karate, called the double shote or double palm heel, also very similar to what Heihachi and other characters from Tekken do. It's just in Tekken they don't have fireballs coming out of their hands, but they do have electricity. Karate really set a base idea for fighting games with Karate Champ and Street Fighter. The jump kicks, the sweep kicks, Ryu and Ken also evolved a lot as time went on, with Ken being more of a kickboxing guy now, while Ryu sticks to his traditional Shotokan background. As you can see in his animations, his breathes, he does a ready stance, and he moves like a karate practitioner. even his parries being the fundamental blocks of Shotokans like a Soto Uke and a Geiden Barari, which are all seen in the Heian series forms. Other characters across many other fighting games also have their karate influence. Makoto, another Street Fighter character, is said to use Shotokan and even has a lot of moves inspired by early karate kata, such as Heian Shodan. Characters from Tekken like Jin, Heihachi, and Kazuya all practice a fictional style of karate called the Mishima style. But Jin, for example, changes to Kyokushin karate and was even modeled after a Kyokushin master for Tekken 4 named Ryu Narashima. A lot of the double strikes and quick punches and kick combinations you can see in Ryu Narashima's fights. Heihachi and Kazuya's style, though, is more akin to Okinawa karate. Looking at some of the forms from Okinawa karate, you can see Heihachi gets his double heel strike that I was talking about earlier in the forms Sasan and Seifa. Also, Jin gets his block from Sasan as well. And it's not just moves, visual design as well. Most of the karate practitioners wear a traditional gi, with some modifications. Ryu, Ken, and Makoto have the most accurate, while Heihachi typically has tigers on his back. There's also a lot of other characters that take karate inspirations from many other different games, but some of them are more of a mixed martial arts style like Paul Phoenix or Go. While karate influences fighting games the most and is why we have the modern fighting game, there is another martial arts that has almost the same amount of influence due to the hundreds of styles that can be found and the movies that popularized it for years, and that is Kung Fu, the Chinese striking martial art dating back to ancient Buddhism. Kinda hard to find its founder, but Kung Fu has become one of the most popularized martial arts by hundreds of movies starring people like Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee. And Kung Fu has had one of the biggest impacts on fighting games. Also, Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee at the same time having such a big influence on fighting games with characters like martial law, Lei, Han Fu, Fei Long. While you could say these are Jeet Kune Do or inspired by Jackie Chan's Drunken Fist, the inspiration for these characters comes more from the person rather than the martial art. But there are tons of characters that are inspired by Kung Fu and the many different styles that are in Kung Fu. One prominent form of Kung Fu in fighting games is Bajuquan, a short-range striking art with elbows and body strikes like the Tetsuzanko. And you can even see a lot of Akira's moves, who is a main user of Bajuquan and Virtual Fighter, in the form on Wushu. And the 6 openings are the Li Dai Kai, are core elements of his gameplay. Another Kung Fu style that one character exemplifies is Wing Chun, the quick, close combat striking art originating from southern China. Leroy Smith is the character you see in Tekken, who is said to be the master of Kung Fu. His 1 and 2 consist of a lot of Busa, or Buigi, and his 1-2 is a Lin Wan Ku, or chain punches. Even in range art, performing a 1-inch punch where one sticks out their finger strikes with only an inch of movement. And in his wind animation and other moves, you see him before Sui Num Tao, the first form in Wing Chun. A lot of his moves and stances can be found in many other forms of Wing Chun as well. One of the last other styles in fighting game commonly found is Shaolin Kung Fu, the traditional monk Kung Fu. A good example of a character that uses this martial arts is Feng Wei, who uses a fictional style of this called the God Hand. It takes a lot of common Kung Fu practices and turns them quite aggressive, which is the opposite of Kung Fu teaching. But in Virtual Fighter, the personification of Shaolin Kung Fu, Li Fei. While design shows the shaved head and traditional uniforms, his style and how he fights as a character goes into many of the Stalin stances like Ufibu or Pubu, and he flows between these using Kung Fu moves like the higher kicks, also showing off the strength and flexibility you would expect from the Shaolin. Another form of Kung Fu that was popularized by Jackie Chan in the movie Drunken Master. A lot of people who use this style in fighting games, one big one is Lei Wulong, who is using the Drunken Fist style. Agile but also unpredictable style, tense they are drunk, so you'll see them fall, roll, and kind of just go all over the place. This form does a lot of the stances in Kung Fu I already talked about, but the person does it as if they were almost drunk. Characters like Jamie and Chun-Li have an actual drinking mechanic where they drink their happy juice and they unlock moves and more abilities, which is the whole idea of the martial art. The more drunk you are, the stronger you get. And the drinks and the movements they do can be found in the Drunken Fist form performed by Jackie Chan in the movie Drunken Master. Now, I could spend forever talking about Kung Fu like other characters. Yun and Yang also use Bajikwan, also known as the 8 Extremities Fist, and characters like Liu Kang, but he also fits into that let's make Bruce Lee into a fighting game character. But I don't have time if I want to get to every martial art to talk about the massive influence Kung Fu has had on fighting games. But the next one I've really been wanting to talk about and get to, because that is the martial art that I personally do, and that is my personal choice of martial arts, Taekwondo. The Korean martial arts, which is the perfect next section that is influenced by both Chinese Kung Fu and Japanese Karate. As many of the founders of this art, known as the Kwans, learned under Funakoshi, who I mentioned earlier is the founder of Shotokan. These students include Byung-Jik Ryo, Jang Sung-sup, and Won-Kook Lee. And others, like Hong Pi, learned Chinese martial arts. They later formed Taekwondo and KTA to unify the arts. Taekwondo does have a big influence due to a lot of characters taking kicks found in the art into character designs. The major influence in these characters doesn't come like the other two. Well, yes, Taekwondo has many forms or Poomsae in Korean, like the Taeguk series. The characters in fighting games don't actually take much influence from these forms and traditions like karate or kung fu. They take from what's more prominent and what Taekwondo is most known for: its sport element and demonstration element. Characters like Juri, Kim Kwap-Ham, and Harang take these ideas and elements of the sport and demonstrations and make them at home in fighting games. While yes, kicks like apchagi or front kick or yopchagi, side kick, can be found in the forms, they don't have the approach that they have in forms. They have a sparring style approach. While modern Taekwondo Olympic sparring is a little watered down, the characters still take heavy influence from how people used to fight in this before a lot of modern changes. Harang, for example, has a lot of fast mid sidekick combos and combinations that can be commonly found in tournament sparring, using like a slide sidekick or what's called a badachagi, a counter kick. A common kick that can be found across all characters in Taekwondo is a drop kick or axe kick, where they show the flexibility and balance required to master this art while also striking at the opponent's head from the top. A very common sparring kick, not a very common kick you see in forms, are also how they mainly use kicks, and their hand techniques are typically lighter and meant to lead into more powerful kicks. At the same time, their gameplay style is what you expect. Either the high rushdown characters putting on a lot of pressure and never letting up and shipping damage really fast, or the smart tactical counterplay. The other influence I said earlier is in the demonstrations. People like the Korean Taekwondo Tigers jumping in the air and performing acrobatics feat with their kicks. Characters like Kim and Harang take this to an extreme, doing kicks soaring to the sky, or more realistic approaches like this move right here, which I swear I've seen someone do that and break boards with, but I just can't remember where. Or Kim, for example, doing a flip and kind of like a front kick in the air, kind of akin to people breaking boards with this move. These characters have a lot of direct influence as they directly practice Taekwondo. A lot of characters like Ken, Chun-Li, and Lee Shaolin may not be stated as Taekwondo practitioners. A lot of elements in their style that can also be found commonly in Taekwondo. But unlike Taekwondo, the next style will always know what kind of character that is. That, of course, is boxing. being said to have originated in ancient Greece, and something in the early 16th and 18th century was used in Britain as a sort of prize fight that tended to be bare knuckle fighting between two combatants. What has its influence on fighting games is professional boxings, which rules came around 1867 with Marquis and Queensberry's rules, which introduced rounds and gloves. Boxing is known for being a hand-to-hand sport. Characters and boxing practitioners only use their hands to strike, no kicks. Modern boxers are known for their lightning fast hand speed and agility on their feet and upper body, showing great abilities to dodge oncoming attacks with what is commonly known as slips and bob and weaves, ducking and dodging punches while setting up for counters. You see this in a lot of characters like Steve or Dudley, where they have moves that can dodge punches coming at the head. Characters also take the speed of boxers, typically being able to throw 5 or 6 jabs and cross in rapid fire, and when they are closer you see some more hooks and body shots, and typically that big finisher, the uppercut, that is most known for its knockout capabilities. Even more unorthodox punches like an overhead cross can be found across these characters, always boasting the speedy footwork and agility, being able to jump back and forth with a blink of an eye with punches. And like most boxers in real life, you see them tend to fight more closer up. They want to get up close and personal with their punches, and these are the characters in fighting games that stick the closest. They're always in your face, throwing punches, pushing you in the corner, and when you think you can counter, slipping out and hitting with their own devastating punches. Boxer characters' grabs are also very similar to clinches you see in boxing matches. As well, you see a lot of characters use what's called a flicker style, or a flicker stance, where they change where their lead hand is, and that changes the angle of the jab so it can be thrown faster. Their stances are tight and they always keep their hands close and in guard, and most characters have influence from famous fighters like Steve and Ed doing the Ali shuffle, being a stance that leads to some heavy counters, or almost half of all fighting games having Michael put you in a coma Tyson. He's basically Balrog in Street Fighter, Michael in Fatal Fury, he's literally himself in Nintendo's Punch-Out. Boxing has such a big influence, one due to its pop culture popularity, but also just being one of the common martial artists that people go to when they want to learn how to defend themselves. Now, there are some liberties that fighting games had to take with these games like Street Fighter or Tekken. Boxers typically do not hit below the belt. It's even against the rules. So the classic leg grab was made that kind of solves the issue, so these boxers would have a more low move. Typically some kind of sweep that is like a 1-leg takedown or 2-leg takedown. Next, striking art also has a big sport element that we are going to talk about. Very similar into a sense to boxing, but now has access to all limbs. And that is Muay Thai, known as the art of 8 limbs, or direct translation, Thai boxing, referring to the striking of kicks, punches, but also elbows and knees. 8 different points of contact, why it's called the art of 8 limb. A Thai martial arts that, while yes has a big sport element, also has such a massive cultural element. People who practice Muay Thai in Thailand, it's a lifestyle through dances, music, and just the overall cultural hype around this sport. Think of like how America reacts to football. Originally used as military training and used in warfare and called Muay Baran, evolved into the sport we know today, Muay Thai. Characters that are most commonly known for this role is Sagat and Fakuram, tall, massive figures with imposing power and kicks. While most Muay Thai fighters are not this tall, it's to impose who a Muay Thai fighter is, right? Using long-reaching kicks called teeps and deceptive elbows and knees. It's supposed to make their presence feel big. Fakuram and Sagat use all the types of Muay Thai, like Muay Mat, Muay Khao, Muay Dat, Muay Sok. These are the different limbs, punching, knees, kicks, and elbows. Most would consider these characters Muay Thai more technical fighters, as they fight with all 8 limbs of Muay Thai. And also looking at the way they throw their kicks, like a roundhouse kick, it looks very different from someone like Harang, for example, who's a lot faster. Their kicks are a little bit slower with more range, but also a more devastating blow as they use the shin as the point of contact. You also see the range that is known in Muay Thai fighters, kicks that reach called teeps, and many flying knees and jumping strikes that quickly catch people off guard. Also, most commonly seeing real low kicks that are also very common in kickboxing. The leg kick with reach that also hits typically knee or upper thigh, and how they mainly use elbows as well as their main strikes, things you don't see in most martial arts, as most martial arts now are in kind of like a sport element and elbows are banned, but Muay Thai is one of the few sports where it's actually encouraged. One of the unique elbows you see in Muay Thai is called a sok tat, a downward elbow seen in moves like this. They also of course have the standard Muay Thai fighter outfit, seeing the shorts and typically some sort of wraps around the legs and hands, showing the intense conditioning these kind of fighters go through, where they kick hard objects to build the bone strength in their bodies. And the cultural parts. Bakaram does a standard Muay Thai dance / prayer called the Wai Ku. He also wears the traditional outfit that has the ropes on his arms, which is an old tradition where fighters would get pieces of clothing from their friends and family to bestow good luck and protection on them. And this dates all the way back to the beginning of Muay Thai or Muay Baran, when this was a war art. Now, one of the other most unique striking arts in fighting games also has very similar elements to Muay Thai, where it's such a big cultural thing, and that of course is Capoeira, a unique striking art from Brazil, an important martial arts from African slaves after being brought by Portuguese slave traders. It is said to be a predecessor of the martial art Angolo that comes from Angola, a martial art that mixes music and dance into fighting. It was used as an allusion to the slave owners dancing in circles at night, making people unaware that they were training, getting ready for a fight, and to escape. Characters like Bob and Eddy are some of the most popular Capoeira characters. They mix in the culture of Capoeira into these characters so well. For example, Eddy tends to use the main instruments used in Capoeira of berimbau, a string instrument that makes it sound via hollowed out through calacabaca, one of the many instruments used in Capoeira like the pandero, atabaque, and agogo, and others. These instruments are seen in the character, but this is not where the fighting game influence comes from. Capoeira practitioners or fighters typically fight via very aerial combat and high agility kicks that almost look like a dance. Capoeira practitioners practice in a circle with people and doing movements in sync, having them sway back and forth to the beat, doing tricks and cartwheels, deceptive kicks that can be interpreted as dance, and almost looks like a mix of breakdancing. And even a character's done, you see that are distinctly Capoeira. They sway back and forth, a sway called the ginga that helps keep the user moving in perpetual motion. And Capoeira users mainly use kicks for their main form of attack. The moves pull from Capoeira, like the cartwheel kicks called ao batido, or an outside-inside kick both Bob and Eddy do called the meola de frente. Stringing these kicks in fast succession in combos and mixing both the ao and the kicks before. Bob even has a paia de capoeira in his move where he spins on his head, and the lower kicks to the legs, like Eddy's negativa stance that leads to his martelo do chao. While Bob does more of a sweep kick that I couldn't find the name of, but his way of doing it is almost more breakdancing. And even some like Elena, who is not necessarily Capoeira, but closer to Angolo, which we mentioned earlier, does very similar things using quick kicks that have reach, but also circular movement. Capoeira is a great mix between the cultural performance and the martial arts, similar to the next one we're going to be talking about. Sumo, a mix of striping and throwing. Sumo is an old Japanese tradition and sport that sees some of the biggest and strongest men in a contest of strength, dating back millennia ago as a Shinto ritual, a kind of performance to deities asking for a good harvest, and slowly transitioning to sport over the years. During the era of the warring state, this is where you started to see it become a true sport, a time where civil wars and conflicts was just a normal Tuesday. Later, during a time sumo was banned during the Edo period, but during Meiji Restoration, Emperor Meiji wanted to make sumo a national sport, a symbol for Japan, which is where we see modern sumo evolve. Sumo has also been in fighting games since the very beginning, with characters like E Honda in Street Fighter, Ganryu in Tekken, and Takarashi in Virtua Fighter. Massive hulking men with the weight to show. The goal of sumo is to knock your opponent out of the ring. Now, most games don't have a ring out system, but they do have corners, and these characters excel at pressing and moving you into these corners. Now, Virtua Fighter, for example, does have a ring out system, and Takarashi was always the best at ringing me out in Virtua Fighter, with a common move, the Supari, a palm strike that is a quick, fast push. Characters in these games typically have some sort of palm strike combo. As you see this commonly in sumo, they use these palm strikes to continually push back an opponent. Other moves that aren't necessarily something sumo users would do in a fight, but has been adopted for fighting games, is the Shiko. This is a ritual to purify the ring in sumo matches, but is also just a good physical exercise. The part fighting games use is the leg lift. You commonly see in the exercise that got translated into moves. And a lot of the times when sumo wrestlers go low in fighting games, they take this stance as a common stance taken before the beginning of sumo matches. Now, sumo also has the connotation wrestler, so there are many throws, like the yobi mo doshi or the sudashi. Hard techniques to pull off due to the massive amount of strength needed to either throw your opponent to the ground using momentum or being able to lift them by their belt and walk them out of the ring. Honda has moves that pushes his opponents back like a flying headbutt, while not realistic, does show how the art of sumo works. And also in design, most characters look, of course, like a real sumo champion, while also wearing the traditional uniform. And in most supers, they summon an arena where you see the salt ring, which in sumo is what is used to determine the outline of the match. Sumo involves a lot of throwing, and it is eccentrically designed on it, but it is not entirely what it is meant to do. That is where Judo has a lot of influence in fighting games, being a Japanese sport of throwing, an art focusing on joint locks and throws, or the goal to transfer your opponent's weight and get them to the floor with ippons, the finishing move of any judo match. Judo is very similar in its roots, coming from Jujitsu and founded by Akano Jidogo, who was a master in the Tenjin Shiro Ryu style of Jujitsu, and he took the best of Jujitsu and idea of mental discipline into Judo. Judo characters like Go and Junbei exist, and Go has a very similar outfit to Judo competitors, a similar gi to the style of karate, but blue rather than white. And other characters like Aoi do Jujitsu and have a lot more counter throws, as the real difference in these ideas. Judo being more sport focused and Jujitsu being more self-defense focused. There aren't many characters that use Judo in fighting games. That's actually not true. Judo is actually seen in a lot of other characters, not just the ones that are Judo practitioners. Throws are such an integral part of fighting games in its design, as if a person can block all your mix-ups, there has to be a third option, a throw. Even in real fights, typically used when you can't get in to find a new type of opening. And the Judo characters use a sort of mixed martial arts, as they do punches and kicks closer to karate or kung fu. Look at Ryu and Ken, you see them use ogoshi or a hip toss, or Paul using a sail nage or an over the shoulder toss. And even Jujitsu characters like Jun and Asuka, they have a lot of these throws that transfer the opponent's energy and are mainly used as counters. And there are so many other characters or throws that are commonly found in Jujitsu or have influence from Judo or Jujitsu, and I could be here for hours talking about each one, but we do have to move on. I said there aren't a lot of Judo characters, but you may be asking yourself, but I know grapplers are such a common trope in fighting games. If it's not Judo, what is it? Well, sometimes yes, a Judo characters exist. 9 times out of 10, if you are a grappler in a fighting game, you are a wrestler, but mainly a wrestler inspired by the WWE. Characters like Tizok, Zangief, King, Potemkin, Wolf. These characters take their influence from the American show business, the WWE, taking wrestling and fusing dramatic, over-the-top characters of people who behave and act over the top to get people excited, almost just like a fighting game. A performance art where we see people throw each other and toss each other in very exaggerated and staged ways. Characters like Zangief using power drivers you see people like The Undertaker do, or things like the Brainbuster, or some of the most over-the-top jump and crashes where you see a character jump in the air and crash down with their body. They are entirely inspired by them all the way down to personality and character. Like King, Tizok, and El Blaze are all luchadore, or Zangief and Wolf fitting that muscular build of people like Andre the Giant. And also in their strikes, they tend to use elbows and cross drops and kicks, but if you take a closer look, they're the same way wrestlers do chops, elbows, and kicks. They look like they cause a lot of damage, but they use part of the arm or the hand to create the most sound and red marks, but really it's just using the hand or body to slap. Looks deadly, but it's actually more safe. And then characters like Tizok and King doing throws into imaginary rings and having the person bounce back for a hit, showing the exact same thing that happens when people bounce off the rubber rings in real WWE shows. These fighting game characters could be plopped right into the WWE and fit perfectly. Their personality, their charm just fit the wrestler's celebrity vibe. Now, with the WWE, we've left the realm of very traditional martial arts like karate and kung fu, but we have moved into the realm of actors and celebrities with wrestling, and that leaves one last thing to talk about: Hollywood fighting. Now you may be asking, what is Hollywood fighting? Well, in part, it is the inspiration Hollywood has had on fighting games and martial arts. People like Bruce Lee, who any character who is modeled after him cannot go without doing some kind of flying sidekick, as that was a main move you saw in many of his movies. The other part is the bit of exaggeration there is. One game and one move exemplifies what I mean by this influence from Hollywood more than any other, and that is... And the move I mean is the one right here. A squat into a giant uppercut makes the hand go over the head, which many fighting games do. This is that over-exaggeration and practical move that can be rooted in martial arts, but is more or less for show, and also goes a little overboard, because on a bad day your opponent's going to go flying 5 feet in the air. On a good day, their head comes right off. It's that movie exaggeration you see. People getting kicked and flying 30 feet back. People doing crazy moves that are very impractical but work in the movies. That is part of martial arts influence, as martial arts has influenced the movies, and the movies have therefore influenced the games. So at the end of the day, while it may be impractical, it still comes from that very much root of martial arts. Now, of course, there are some honorable mentions, some martial arts that didn't get talked about, some that don't really get a lot of representation into fighting games, and those are like ninjutsu, seen in characters like Guy, Ibuki, or Andy, military and SWAT styles like Kevin Rain or Vanessa, and the ones that aren't really martial arts based, but hey, they're here in fighting games, like 12. And the countless weapons like everybody from Samurai Showdown, or Billy Kane, Axl Lowe, and also all the other characters that fit into a lot of different molds like Paul Phoenix, Chun-Li, Terry Bogard, and many other characters that I can't really pinpoint what martial arts they do. And some that I probably missed because I didn't play the game they're from. Now, before I have hours on hours on hours to edit, I'm going to end it here. Fighting games take so much from the real martial arts, and there's so many characters that I could talk about. The influence runs deep. A modern fighting game wouldn't exist without the concepts and idea of martial arts, the traditions and concepts that have been passed down. Fighting has always existed, but fighting isn't martial arts. Understanding how to move and get the edge over your opponent Having the mental fortitude to stay calm under pressure, to train hard and understand how to fight is martial arts. And that is the same for fighting games. No matter what, always training, always getting better, always evolving, always learning. That is what I think fighting games take the most from martial arts.